the false gods. The galaxy had many rulers, but none as feared as the Xavar dominion. For centuries they had called themselves gods, and no one dared to argue. Their ships were made of golden metal that shimmered in the stars, and their voices echoed through every channel with commands that no one refused. Weaker races bent their knees, offering tribute, slaves, and resources, afraid of punishment. The Xavar never allowed anyone to question them because they ruled with fear and illusions. They claimed immortality, but in truth they were flesh and blood. They claimed eternal wisdom, but in reality they only used stolen technology from forgotten ages. Still, no one dared to expose the lie, because the Xavar destroyed anyone who tried. When they arrived in orbit of a new world, the people of that planet either bowed or burned, and so the galaxy lived in silence, whispering behind closed doors but never speaking aloud. But there was one exception. The humans of Earth did not bow. The Xavar had tried to send messages of domination, demanding Earth's surrender. They declared, "You will kneel before your gods." But the humans only answered with silence. This silence was more dangerous than words because it meant defiance. And in the galaxy, no one had ever dared to deny the Xavar before. Inside the council chambers of the Xavar, the God King himself sat upon a golden throne. Around him were his priests, his generals, and his chosen, all wrapped in armor, glowing with divine symbols. Holograms flickered in the room, showing planets that had already bent the knee. The God King raised his hand and laughed, his voice echoing like thunder. "These humans," he declared, "are fools, ants who crawl upon their dirt world. They dare ignore us. They dare to defy us. They will be crushed beneath our feet." The chamber erupted in laughter, the sound of arrogance filling the hall. But in the corner of the room, one of the younger generals looked uneasy. He had heard whispers from scouts, stories of human fleets moving quietly, stories of weapons being tested in deep space. He dared to speak. "My king, perhaps we should be careful. Perhaps these humans are not as weak as we think." The God King's eyes burned with fire as he rose from his throne. "Careful," he hissed. "We are gods. We do not fear mortals. We do not bow to ants." The general lowered his head, silent, knowing that to argue further meant death. While the Xavar laughed in their arrogance, something else was happening in secret. On a distant space station, far from the core worlds, a council of desperate leaders gathered. These were not Xavar, but broken races, species who had lost everything under the so-called gods one by one. They had watched their people enslaved, their cultures erased, their histories rewritten to glorify the Xavar. And now, in the darkest corner of the galaxy, they had sent an envoy, not to the Dominion, not to the gods, but to Earth. The envoy was small, thin, and scarred, wearing robes torn by years of struggle. He stood in the shadows of Earth's command chamber, his voice shaking as he spoke. "We beg you, humans, do not ignore this threat. The Xavar will not stop until every world kneels, until every child grows believing that they are gods." His eyes were hollow, filled with the weight of countless generations under chains. He whispered of things no one else dared to speak aloud. He whispered of the Xavar's greatest secret. They are not gods. They are not eternal. Their power is stolen, their illusions are fragile, but we cannot fight them, only you can. The human commanders listened in silence, their eyes sharp and calculating. They did not laugh like the Xavar. They did not boast of divinity. Instead, they studied the envoy's words, weighing them like iron. They already knew the Xavar were a threat, but now they had confirmation. And more than that, they had a reason. For humanity did not fight only to win battles. They fought to tear down lies. Deep within the heart of Earth's fleet command, hidden from the eyes of the galaxy, a shadow moved. A name was spoken quietly. Among human leaders, a name that carried both fear and hope, the Dreadnought. It was not a myth, not an illusion, but real. A single warship unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, built in silence, tested in secret. It waited. The humans had never needed to show it before, but now the time was coming. The envoy looked at the humans and saw something he had never seen in the eyes of other species. Not fear, not submission, but resolve. Back in the Zevar throne room, the God King raised a cup of glowing wine and smiled. The galaxy will kneel, the humans will break, and once they are ashes, no one will ever question us again. But his laughter echoed into the stars, and far away, deep in the silence of space, the Dreadnought stirred awake. The Dreadnought awakens. In the dark silence of space, the human fleet gathered. Ships of steel and shadow stood in formation, their weapons glowing faintly, their engines humming like caged storms. For most species, this would already be a terrifying sight. But at the center of it all, hidden like a giant waiting to breathe, was the Human Dreadnought. It was not a ship of beauty. It was not built to inspire faith like the golden temples of the Zevar. It was built for war. Its hull stretched longer than cities, black as night, with armor so thick no known weapon could pierce it. The surface was carved with strange patterns, not for decoration but for channeling power. Energy coursed through its body like veins, humming with restrained fury. The crew inside worked in silence. There were no shouts, no cheers, no prayers. Every man and woman moved with calm precision, their faces lit by glowing screens. They were not followers of gods. They were humans, and humans did not bow to false thrones. The envoy who had come from the broken races stood on the command bridge. His small frame shivered as he looked out through the massive viewport. The Dreadnought loomed before him like a mountain of steel, and he whispered in awe, "This is not a ship. This is a force of nature." But the human admiral, standing, tall at the center, only nodded. His voice was calm, steady and cold. "This is not for show, this is not for fear, this is for truth." As the engines roared to life, the stars themselves seemed to tremble. Other allied ships in the fleet pulled back slightly as if the Dreadnought's presence alone demanded space. The envoy clutched his robes, his heart racing. He had seen the Zevar's greatest fleets. He had seen their glowing weapons and their grand palaces in orbit. But never had he seen something like this. A creation not meant to deceive, not meant to enslave, but to destroy illusions. Across the galaxy, the Zevar watched with arrogance. Scouts reported the human fleet moving, and the God King laughed from his golden throne. "They send one ship," he mocked. "One mortal ship against the glory of gods. How amusing." The priests echoed his laughter, their voices filling the chamber with pride, but beneath their laughter, there was a shadow of unease, because deep within them they remembered something. The humans had never truly shown their power, and no one knew what their silence had been hiding. The Dreadnought moved through space like a predator, slow but unstoppable, its systems awakened one by one, great cannons sliding into place, missile bays unlocking with metallic clicks. At its core, a weapon hummed, one so secret even many in the human fleet had never seen it fired. The admiral's second-in-command whispered, "Sir, the galaxy will see this." The admiral's gaze never left the stars. "Good," he said. "Let them see, let them know." The first destination was chosen, a Zevar fortress world, one of their sacred planets covered in temples and warships. Billions lived under the lie of godhood, kneeling before golden statues. The humans did not come for worship. They came to tear down the lie. The Dreadnought's engines flared brighter, and the ship vanished into hyperspace. Inside the temples of the fortress world, Zevar priests were already preparing celebrations. They expected victory before the battle even began. They preached to the enslaved crowds that their gods could never be defeated. But above them the sky darkened. The Dreadnought appeared, its shadow covering the horizon. People gasped, both slaves and masters staring upward in disbelief. Never had they seen such a ship. It was as if a piece of night itself had come alive. On the bridge of the Dreadnought, the admiral gave no speeches. He did not call his crew to prayer, he only spoke 3 words: target and fire. The first cannon blast lit the skies, ripping through the Zevar defenses as if they were paper. Golden ships burst apart, temples crumbled, and fire rained from the heavens. The envoy fell to his knees, not in fear but in shock. He whispered, "The gods They will fall, the Zevar commanders screamed in disbelief, sending more fleets, tens of thousands of ships. But each volley of the dreadnought crushed them, burned them, erased them. The enslaved species looked to the sky and saw not gods, but the truth. For the first time they believed the Zevar could be defeated. Back in the Zevar throne room, the God King's smile cracked. His golden cup trembled in his hand. Reports flooded in, each one worse than the last. And though he still roared in anger, deep in his heart, he felt something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. The dreadnought did not speak. It did not boast. It only moved forward, a silent answer to centuries of lies, and the galaxy began to whisper, "The humans have awakened." The first clash, the Zevar believed their numbers made them untouchable. For every battle in history, they had overwhelmed their enemies with endless fleets of golden warships. Now, as the Human Dreadnought entered their territory, they repeated the same arrogance. "Send the armada," the God King commanded. "Let the mortals drown in the light of gods." From the fortress world to the far reaches of the system, Zevar ships filled the void. Thousands upon thousands appeared, their formation stretching across the stars. Their golden hulls glowed like suns, their weapons crackled with radiant fire. For the enslaved watching from below, it looked like the arrival of heaven itself. The priest shouted, "The gods descend, the ants will be crushed." But among the crowd, whispers of doubt began to grow, because the shadow of the Human Dreadnought still hung above, unmoving, unafraid, on the bridge of the Dreadnought. The human admiral studied the screens with calm eyes. His crew worked without fear, adjusting coordinates, charging weapons, tracking every hostile ship. The envoy of the broken races stood behind him, trembling. He whispered, "There are too many, no ship can stand against this." But the admiral only replied, "Then they will learn that humans do not count numbers, we make history." The first Zevar strike came like a storm. Beams of golden light cut through space, missiles rained from every angle. The sky seemed to shatter as thousands of blasts converged on the dreadnought. For a moment, the enslaved watching from the surface thought it was over. How could one ship survive such fury? But then the smoke cleared. The dreadnought still stood, its black hull glowing faintly with shimmering barriers. The Zevar fire had left nothing but scratches across its surface. The enslaved gasped, the priests faltered, and the soldiers in their golden ships felt their confidence break. Then came the human response. The dreadnought's cannons ignited, each shot roaring like thunder. One volley tore through hundreds of ships, splitting them apart in seconds. Entire squadrons vanished in bursts of fire, their golden wreckage scattering across the void. Zevar commanders screamed through their comms, demanding formations, demanding order. But the dreadnought kept firing, calm and precise, each blast a hammer of truth. Missiles followed, streaking like meteors across the darkness. They struck the largest ships, battleships that had once been symbols of godhood. One by one they cracked open, spilling fire and bodies into space. For the first time in centuries, the Zevar armada faltered. The illusion of invincibility shattered with every explosion. The enslaved races watching from the planet fell into silence. They had been told no mortal weapon could harm the Zevar. But the sky was proving the lie. Children pointed at the dreadnought with wide eyes. And in the streets, voices began to whisper, "The gods bleed." The God King's throne room shook with fury as reports poured in. "How can this be?" he shouted, slamming his golden staff against the floor. "Destroy them. Burn them. Show the galaxy who rules." His priests panicked, his generals scrambled. They had never seen their fleets destroyed so quickly. Still, they obeyed. Still, they sent more ships. Wave after wave poured into the battle, tens of thousands. Against one, but the dreadnought advanced slowly, steadily, as if nothing could stop it. Its shields held, its weapons thundered. The human crew never panicked, never shouted. Each move was measured, each strike exact. The envoy stared in disbelief. Tears forming in his eyes, he whispered, "This is not war, this is judgment." But the Zevar were not finished. Desperate and furious, they activated a weapon forbidden even among their kind. From the heart of their armada, a colossal sphere of energy began to form. It glowed brighter than a star, pulsing with raw destruction. Priests cried out in joy, calling it the divine fire. The enslaved trembled, believing the gods had revealed their true power. The God King himself stood and roared across the galaxy. Now the mortals will kneel, now they will burn. On the bridge of the Dreadnought, silence fell. The sphere of energy expanded, threatening to consume everything in its path. The envoy fell to his knees, crying, "Nothing can survive this." But the admiral's eyes were calm, his voice steady. "Prepare the core. Prepare the mirror." The crew obeyed without hesitation, activating hidden systems deep within the ship. The Dreadnought's hull glowed brighter, its black armor shifting, unfolding like layers of a machine never meant to be seen. Energy surged through it, bending, twisting, channeling into a single point. As the Zevar weapon launched forward, the Dreadnought moved straight into the storm. The enslaved screamed, believing the humans had gone mad. The Zevar laughed, certain of their victory. But the Human Dreadnought did not crumble, it did not burn. Instead, it absorbed the energy, redirecting it, shaping it. The ship itself roared with power, its cannons glowing hotter than suns. Then, with a single strike, it unleashed the storm back upon the Zevar. The forbidden weapon turned against its masters. The armada was torn apart in waves of fire, entire fleets consumed in seconds. The golden ships melted into nothing, their screams echoing across channels until silence fell. The galaxy watched as the false gods burned in their own light. When the flames faded, only the Dreadnought remained. Unbroken, unbowed, unstoppable, and the galaxy whispered one truth. The gods are not gods. They are lies. The illusion shatters. The galaxy had always believed in the Zevar illusion. For generations they had ruled through fear and fire, calling themselves gods. They built temples in the skies, golden statues on every world. Their voices carried across systems like thunder. To question them meant death. To resist them meant extinction. And yet now, before billions of watching eyes, the illusion cracked. The Dreadnought had not only survived the forbidden weapon, it had turned it back upon the Zevar. Whole fleets, that once shone like suns, were reduced to burning fragments. The golden glow that had once inspired worship now scattered as wreckage drifting through space. The enslaved looked to the skies and saw fire raining down, but it was not human cities burning. It was the gods themselves. On the streets of the fortress world, slaves stared upward, mouths open. For the first time in their lives they saw Zevar warships falling, their temples exploding. Priests tried to scream lies, shouting, "This is a test, the gods are still eternal." But no one believed them anymore. Children pointed and laughed. Mothers wept. Warriors clenched their fists in hope. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. The gods bleed, the gods die. On the bridge of the Dreadnought, the admiral stood calm, his hands behind his back. His crew moved like steel machines. Precise and steady, every report came in with quiet voices, shields holding, weapons recharging, enemy fleets retreating. The envoy from the broken races stood at the viewport, his face pale, his voice shaking. "I have waited my whole life for this moment," he whispered, "to see them fall." The admiral looked at him once and answered, "This is not the end. This is only the beginning. Illusions do not die in one battle. They must be destroyed everywhere." Across the galaxy, transmissions carried the battle. Every enslaved world, every secret resistance, every broken species, watched the fall of the Zevar armada. For years the Zevar had used those same channels to demand worship. Now they showed the truth. The gods were mortal, the gods could be defeated. Inside the Zevar throne room, silence hung like a blade. The God King's generals knelt, their golden armor scorched, their voices trembling. "Our fleets burn, my king, our people are afraid, the illusion weakens." But the God King slammed his staff against the floor, his voice shaking with rage. "No! We are gods, we cannot fall. They will not dare to finish what they started." His priests echoed his words, but their eyes betrayed fear. They too had seen the battle. They too had watched their fleets turn to ash. The God King ordered more. "Summon the second wave. Release the temple fleets. Call forth the seraph guardians." And so the skies filled again with golden ships. These were the vessels hidden for centuries, armed with relics from ancient wars. But even as they rose, the people below no longer cheered. The illusion was broken, the faith was gone. The gods were no longer gods, they were tyrants exposed. The dreadnought advanced into the heart of the system, its cannons fired once more, tearing through the temple fleets like fragile glass. The seraph guardians, enormous warships adorned with golden wings, moved to intercept. But the dreadnought's missiles pierced them, its beams melted them. For every strike of the Zivar, the humans answered with 10. The battle was no longer a clash of armies. It was a trial, and in that trial the gods were failing. The enslaved began to rise across the fortress world. Slaves broke chains, smashed statues, burned the banners of their masters. The priests cried for order, but their words had no power. The sight of the dreadnought's shadow above gave courage stronger than any sermon. The illusion of godhood was collapsing not only in space but in every heart below. The God King's fury grew, his throne chamber trembling as he shouted, "They dare betray us, they dare spit upon their gods." His golden eyes turned to his generals. "If illusions fail, then we will rule by fear, burn their cities, erase their hope. Let them see that even mortals cannot resist forever." But his generals hesitated, their hands shaking on their weapons, because even they no longer fully believed, and belief was the only thing that had ever made them gods. On the dreadnought, the admiral gave new orders. "Do not stop, do not give them time. Strike until there is nothing left to worship." His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with fire, for he knew this war was not about territory, it was about truth, and the truth was now unstoppable. Another volley left the dreadnought brighter and louder than before. It shattered the last of the seraph guardians. It cut the Zivar command ships into fragments. The Golden Throne fleet, once untouchable, now scattered like dust before a storm. And, across the galaxy, the truth spread. The gods had no power. The gods had no divinity. The gods had only lies, and lies once broken could never be rebuilt. The dreadnought drifted forward, silent, relentless. Behind it burned the wreckage of an empire's pride, and ahead waited the throne world itself, the place where the God King still sat, refusing to admit what the galaxy already knew. The age of false gods was ending, and humanity was the hammer that shattered the illusion. The wrath of humanity. The galaxy had seen battles before, but nothing like this. The dreadnought moved deeper into Zavar space, its shadow covering worlds once called sacred. Every system it passed trembled, not from prayers, but from silence. The silence of people realizing the gods they feared were nothing more than tyrants in golden masks. The enslaved whispered among themselves, "If they can fall, then we can rise." On 100 planets, chains were broken, temples burned, and slaves raised their heads for the first time. But the dreadnought did not stop to watch. It had only one mission: destroy the illusion forever. On the throne world of the Zavar, panic spread like fire. Priests screamed in the streets, begging people to keep faith. They promised that the God King would bring vengeance, that the gods would rise again. But the people's eyes were different now. They no longer bowed. They no longer prayed. They only waited for the final blow. In the great palace of gold, the God King paced, his robes dragging across the shining floor. His generals knelt, broken and ashamed. "My king," one whispered, "the mortals advance. They have destroyed everything in their path." But the God King roared, his voice echoing against the walls. "We are gods. We do not fall to mortals. I will show them wrath they have never known." He turned to a hidden chamber, a vault sealed for centuries. Inside were weapons so powerful they had never been used. Engines of destruction, forged in the age before. Memory. He ordered them armed. He ordered them released. "If the galaxy will not worship," he growled, "then the galaxy will burn." Meanwhile, on the bridge of the dreadnought, the human admiral stood calm. His crew reported the Zavar's desperate moves, their secret fleets, their hidden weapons. The envoy of the broken races trembled as he heard the reports. They will unleash horrors. They will destroy whole worlds just to keep their throne. The admiral's eyes narrowed, his voice cold. Then we will not let them. The age of fear ends now. The Dreadnought's cannons roared once more, striking at the outer defenses of the throne world. Fortresses built to last 1,000 years fell in minutes. Zavar fleets tried to resist, but their golden ships shattered against human fire. Every blast carried a message not just of war, but of judgment. It was not vengeance alone. It was wrath. The wrath of a people who would not bow, who would not believe lies. On the streets below, the enslaved gathered. They looked up at the Dreadnought's shadow, their hearts pounding. They saw their masters running. They saw their temples crumble, and for the first time they shouted words once unthinkable. Down with the gods, down with the lies. The priests tried to silence them, but the crowd surged forward. Golden statues were pulled to the ground, banners torn apart. The illusion of power collapsed faster than the armies themselves. The wrath of humanity was not only in its weapons, but in the courage it gave to others. The God King finally appeared before his people, his voice booming across the city. Do not betray your gods. Do not kneel to mortals, he commanded. But instead of cheers, he was met with silence. Eyes that once looked up in worship now glared with hatred. The wrath of humanity had spread like fire. It was no longer just a human war. It was a galaxy's rebellion. On the Dreadnought, the admiral gave his final orders for the siege. Break their shield. Destroy their throne. No more gods. The ship's core weapon began to charge. The same system that had once turned the Zavar's divine fire back upon them. The entire vessel trembled as energy built. Humming with unstoppable force, the God King, watching from his palace, felt fear for the first time in centuries. He raised his golden staff, his voice desperate. I am eternal. I am divine. You cannot destroy me. But his words carried no weight. Not to his people, not to the galaxy, not to the humans. The Dreadnought's cannons fired. The golden walls of the palace cracked. The towers shattered. The false throne crumbled to dust. The wrath of humanity was complete. It was not only the destruction of ships and armies, it was the death of belief in false gods. The galaxy knew the truth now. Humans had not come to conquer. They had come to end lies, and in doing so, they had given hope to billions who had never dared to dream of freedom. The Dreadnought hovered above the throne world, silent and unyielding. Its shadow was not the shadow of terror, but of truth. The enslaved raised their fists to the sky, not in worship but in victory, and across the galaxy, a single thought burned in every mind. The gods are gone, but humanity remains. The God Kings fall. The throne world burned, golden towers collapsed into ash, fleets shattered into silence, temples torn apart by the very people who once bowed to them. The galaxy watched as the illusion of divinity crumbled, but one figure still stood, defiant against the storm. The God King, last of the Zavar rulers, refused to kneel. His throne ship, a colossal vessel shaped like a golden palace, rose from the heart of the city, its wings spread across the sky, fast enough to block out the sun. It was not only a ship, but a monument of pride, built to remind the galaxy of his so-called immortality. Now it would face the Dreadnought. On the bridge of the human warship, silence fell. The crew stared at the golden palace ship appearing on the sensors, its size dwarfing even the largest fleets they had destroyed. The envoy gasped, clutching his robes. That is the throne ship, the heart of their empire. They say it has never been touched by fire, never been touched by time. The admiral's eyes narrowed, his voice steady. Then today it will be broken. The God King's voice thundered across every channel in the system. Mortals of Earth, you have dared too much. You have burned my fleets, destroyed my temples, broken my illusion, but you will not break me. His voice was heavy, laced with power, but beneath it trembled something else. Fear. I am eternal. I am divine, and I will show the galaxy the price of defiance. The throne ship unleashed its wrath. Beams of light erupted from its wings, each one strong enough to crack moons. Dozens of dread cannons fired at once, shaking the void with their power. The enslaved races watching cried out, certain the humans would finally fall. But the dreadnought met. The fire head-on, its shields flared, bending under the weight of the assault. Metal groaned, alarms echoed across the bridge, but the ship held. The admiral's voice cut through the chaos, calm as ever. "Return fire." And the dreadnought answered with thunder. Its cannons roared, unleashing beams that sliced into the Golden Palace ship. Sections of its wings exploded, fragments burning as they fell into the atmosphere. But still the God King laughed, his voice echoing across the stars. "You cannot destroy me. I am beyond death." The battle raged like no other. The dreadnought moved with precision, firing volley after volley. The throne ship answered with fury, shaking the heavens with its blasts. For every piece of golden armor destroyed, the palace ship struck back. With twice the fire, it was not just a clash of ships, it was a clash of symbols, the false divinity of the Zevar against the unyielding truth of humanity. On the ground below, the people watched in silence. Every explosion lit up the skies. Every strike shook their world. They no longer prayed to the God King. They no longer begged for his victory. They only waited, holding their breath, knowing the outcome of this battle would decide the fate of the galaxy. Inside the throne ship, the God King stood at the heart of a golden chamber. His staff glowed with ancient power. His eyes burned with fury. He shouted to his crew, "Give me more power, give me everything, I will not fall to mortals." But his crew hesitated, fear in their eyes. For the first time, even his closest followers doubted him. Their god looked less like eternity and more like desperation. The dreadnought pressed forward. Its weapons targeted the palace ship's core, a massive reactor glowing with divine fire. The admiral gave the final order, his voice cold. "End it." The dreadnought's main cannon charged, the energy humming like the heartbeat of a star. The crew braced. The envoy trembled. The galaxy watched. The beam fired, a line of pure destruction that tore through the void. It struck the throne. Ship's heart ripping through golden walls, shattering its core. The palace ship screamed as explosions ripped across its wings. The God King roared one final time, his voice filled with rage and despair. "They are not gods. They are something worse." And then the light consumed him. The throne ship collapsed, falling in fragments into the burning skies of his world. The people below stared as the great golden monument, once the symbol of their enslavement, fell into ruin. The God King was gone, his illusion gone with him. The galaxy fell silent, not with fear, but with freedom. On the bridge of the dreadnought, no cheers rose. The admiral simply lowered his gaze. "It is done," he said, his voice heavy. The envoy wept, his hands trembling. "You have broken them, you have broken the gods." But the admiral answered coldly, "They were never gods, only tyrants, and now the galaxy knows." The dreadnought drifted above the shattered throne world, its shadow covering the ruins of temples and the fragments of the throne ship. The enslaved races lifted their eyes, no longer in fear, but in hope. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy had no gods, only humans, and the truth they carried, the legacy of fear. The God King was gone. His golden throne ship lay in ruins, its pieces burning in the skies of his own world. The palace that once stood as the heart of the Dominion was nothing but ash, and the galaxy watched in silence as the illusion of divinity crumbled forever. On the ground, the enslaved fell to their knees, not in worship, but in disbelief. Chains were torn apart, banners of gold burned, statues of false gods shattered. The people no longer bowed to the Zevar, they raised their heads to the stars, and in every heart a single truth echoed: the gods are dead. The dreadnought hovered above the broken world, silent and unyielding. It did not celebrate. It did not boast. It simply remained, a shadow against the stars, a reminder of what had been done. On the bridge, the admiral looked across the ruined system, his voice low. "It is finished." But the envoy of the broken races shook his head. "No," he whispered. This is not the end, this is the beginning. Across the galaxy, transmissions spread. Every world enslaved by the Zevar saw the fall of their false rulers. Every race broken by centuries of lies now knew the truth. The gods had not been gods at all, only mortals hiding behind stolen power. And it was humanity, the youngest race, the race that refused to bow, that had revealed it. On distant colonies, whispers turned to chants. Humanity broke the gods. On shattered worlds, rebels raised banners of freedom. Humans fight for truth. But even among allies, even among those freed, there was unease. Because if humanity could break gods, then what were humans? The Zevar survivors fled into the shadows of space, their power broken, their faith gone. Some wept, some cursed, some swore vengeance. But they no longer spoke as gods, only as scattered tyrants without thrones. Their age was over, and all who saw them knew it. In the council chambers of other empires, leaders gathered. They whispered in fear, their voices trembling. The humans destroyed the Zevar. They shattered the gods. They did what none of us dared. Some called for alliance, begging to stand beside Earth. Others whispered of danger. If they can break gods, what could they do to us? The Dreadnought returned slowly from its campaign, scarred but undefeated, its hull still black, its weapons still humming with restrained fire. It drifted back toward Earth like a silent guardian. Behind it followed not just fleets, but the eyes of the galaxy. Every system, every race, every leader now watched humanity with new fear. In the great halls of Earth's command, the Admiral stood before his people. He gave no speeches of conquest, no declarations of empire. His words were simple, steady, clear. We never claimed to be gods. We never claimed divinity. We are human, and we fight to destroy lies. The galaxy heard those words, but they did not calm them, because the truth was more terrifying than the illusion. For centuries, the Zevar had ruled through fear of their false divinity. Now that fear was gone, replaced by something new, the fear of humanity. A race that did not kneel. A race that built weapons no one could match. A race that shattered gods without becoming them. What was more dangerous than a god? A human who needed no throne. On broken worlds, freed slaves cheered the name of Earth. But in distant palaces, rulers plotted. Some spoke of alliances, some spoke of wars to come. The galaxy was free, but it was not at peace, because peace was fragile when fear lingered. The Dreadnought drifted into orbit of Earth, its shadow covering oceans and continents. Children on the ground pointed up with awe. Soldiers saluted. Families whispered prayers of thanks. But even among humans, there was silence. They knew the galaxy now looked at them differently. No longer as equals, but as something to fear. In the darkness of space where no one could hear, the Admiral stood alone in the command chamber. He looked at the stars, his voice barely above a whisper. They called themselves gods. Now they are gone. But the galaxy will remember who destroyed them. And that memory may be heavier than any throne. The Dreadnought's engines dimmed, its weapons cooled, yet the legacy of what it had done burned brighter than any star. The illusion was gone. The gods were broken. But in their place stood something far more enduring, the legend of humanity. And across the galaxy, from the smallest colony to the mightiest empire, one question lingered in every mind. If humans could shatter gods, then what else could they do?